The child was given beneath a scorched sky, where the dust trembled in heat-sick spirals and the creak of wagon wheels was the only music for miles. The woman stood barefoot beside the ruts, skirt hem-stiff with blood and clay. She was thin and hollow-eyed, the bones of her face stark beneath leathery skin. Her arms clutched the bundle so tight it took effort to loosen her grip, even as she extended it. The man she gave the child to was no savior. He looked at her the way one might look at a dying horse, sorrowful but pragmatic. He was passing through with a string of mules and a cart of salted hides, a trader headed north toward Wyoming territory, and he hadn't stopped for a soul in 3 days. But something in the woman's face, the fierce, final stillness of it, made him draw rein. "She's fed," the woman said. "You won't need to suckle her. There's a tin of goat milk tied under her cloth. She don't cry much." "Name Elijah." The man glanced down at the bundle, saw a round, too quiet face and 2 small fists tucked under her chin. Then he looked at the horizon, measuring the weight of this new thing. "You're not common." The woman shook her head. Her eyes didn't stray from the baby. "My husband in the house shot himself last night. I already dug 1 hole. I ain't got it in me for 2. The trader didn't ask her name. He didn't ask if there was family or what sins she carried. He only took the child, slow and solemn, and rode on without another word. She stood watching until the wagon crested the hill and vanished. By sundown, she'd hanged herself in the rafters of the sod cabin. No one found her until weeks later. By then, the crows had done what grief couldn't. Elijah grew up on the move. The trader, a stooped man called Rig, kept her alive by habit more than affection. He fed her when he fed himself, bundled her close on cold nights, and struck her only when she wandered too far from camp. When she cried, he ignored her. When she watched him with those glass-clear eyes, he sometimes muttered apologies he never explained. He never called her by name, only girl or quiet, on rare days, pup. They traveled through rail camps and mountain passes, past gold-rush towns bloated with greed and ghost towns hollowed by failure. Elijah learned early how to read the sky for storms, how to gut a rabbit and trap a squirrel, how to lie still while men looked and not be seen. She spoke little. Her voice had a low rasp to it, like wind through broken boards. By the time she was 10, she could patch a mule's hoof, load a rifle, and tie a tourniquet in the dark. Rig aged fast. His teeth went soft and his hands trembled when he carved meat. He grew paranoid, mumbling about Pinkertons and debts unpaid, about men he'd wronged and men who might be coming. When his breath turned shallow and his skin yellowed, he made camp in the dry hills north of Butte and told her not to move him. "I've done my share of dirt," he told her, coughing up bile. "You weren't part of it, you understand me." She said nothing. When he died, she buried him with the tin of coins he kept under his coat. Then she took the rifle, the mule, and the name he'd once muttered in his sleep, Rig, and started walking. In the town of Darrington, they mistook her for a boy. She was lean and sharp-faced, dressed in worn buckskins, hair hacked blunt at her jaw. She spoke soft and slow, with an accent no one could place. The smith gave her work hauling water and scraping hides. The saloon girls liked her, though she didn't talk to them. She drank milk instead of whiskey and played cards with a gambler missing 2 fingers. She didn't ask questions, didn't flinch when men fought or guns went off. She watched everything, remembered everything. She was 12 when she slit her first throat. It was a drifter with bad teeth and worse breath. He cornered her behind the smithy, stinking of rot gut and sweat, thinking she was younger and weaker than she looked. She didn't scream. She let him put his hands on her, let him breathe close, and then she slid the skinning knife deep into his neck, side to side, just like she'd seen done to deer. He bled out fast, his mouth working like he meant to apologize. She wiped the knife on his coat and dragged the body to the river. The next morning, she watched the sheriff ride past with a posse. No one asked where the drifter went. No one missed him. She left town that night, following the moon west. By 14, Elia had learned the art of staying overlooked. She didn't rob banks or hold up trains. She didn't make friends or join posses. She wandered from town to town, small enough to pass as a half-starved farm boy, polite enough to be ignored. She took jobs where she could find them, branding cattle, gutting fish, scrubbing decks, and slept with one hand on her knife. But the West was a mouth with teeth, and even ghosts left trails. It was in Bent Creek, a mining town swallowed in smoke and copper dust, that she heard the name for the first time, Beringer. She was mucking ore from a collapsed shaft when an old hand muttered the name like a curse. A man who'd owned half the valley once, who built fortunes off blood and fire, who vanished after a string of killings no one dared prosecute. Beringer, the name stayed with her like a shard in the gut. She didn't know why, but it pulled at her sharp and constant, so she stayed, waited, listened, and one night she heard more. In the back room of a saloon, over the rattle of dice and the hiss of spit in sawdust, a miner said something strange. "That Beringer girl, the one got gave away, she's dead, or worse." And something inside her woke up. She left Bent Creek before dawn, didn't sleep, didn't speak. Beringer girl, the one got gave away. She remembered her mother's face then, the raw, final stillness. The way she didn't look up when the wagon rolled away. She had a name now. And she had something more. She had a reason. Elia followed the name like a hunter follows blood. It led her across mountain passes and dry gulches, through towns stamped out of timber and tin. She spoke the name soft at first, cautious as prayer. Most shook their heads, some laughed. One man, old and half-blind, spat tobacco and said, "Beringer's a curse, not a man." But curses come from somewhere. In Bittirun, a saloon girl with split lips and a crooked wrist told her about a place called Vinegar Flats. Said Beringer had business there once. 15 years back, maybe more. A mine they say went bad. Real bad. Elia didn't ask what she meant. She only nodded, paid for the drink she didn't touch, and walked out into the storm. Vinegar Flats wasn't on any map, but she found it by asking about dead men. The kind buried in shallow graves with no markers. She asked where the creeks ran red and the trees stopped growing, where folks spoke in lowered voices and windows stayed shuttered. She found it after 2 weeks riding through wet pine and broken trail. A place half swallowed by mud and fog, the remnants of a mining camp scattered like bones, rotted shacks, rusted tools, a shaft choked with weeds and bad air. No one lived there now, no birds sang, but the place remembered. In the foreman's quarters, half collapsed, she found the name carved into the wall behind the stove. Not just Beringer, 5 names, men who'd run the mine. Men who'd vanished when the cave-in happened, and one name beneath the others etched deeper, Susanna, a woman's name. Alone. Elia sat with it until the light failed. She didn't cry, she let the silence in. The next morning she rode back down the slope and found an archivist in Halberd Point who owed money to rough men. For a silver dollar and a jug of rye, he gave her what she needed: old contracts, land deeds, a court ledger with torn pages and dried blood on the spine. Beringer, Josiah Beringer, founder of the Claiborne Syndicate, wanted in 3 territories. Last seen traveling with a private guard and 2 mules full of ledgers and gold. No arrest, no trial. But rumors of a daughter given up during the Claiborne collapse. A widow with no name. Elia didn't sleep that night. She made a fire and watched it burn down to nothing. When the coals were low, she took the knife from her boot and pressed it to her palm. She bled slow. It didn't hurt. She wanted to feel it. Months passed. She grew taller, meaner, quieter. The towns shifted behind her like scenes on a stage, each one painted with the same brush: dust, lies, men with full guns and empty eyes. She carried a Colt now, taken from a man who mistook her for prey. She kept her hair braided tight against her skull and wore a duster stiff with blood and rain. She didn't need to ask about Berenger anymore. Word traveled faster than she did. Some girl askin' after ghosts, they'd say, real quiet. Real pale, walks like she ain't scared of hell. They started calling her widow's child. Some said she was cursed, others swore she was a revenant. Nobody knew her real name, she let them wonder. In Clearwater Bend, a trapper told her Berenger kept a summer estate once, up near the Red Basin where the cliffs shine like rusted iron. She found it half burned, the windows shot out, floorboards warped by weather. Inside, nothing but ashes and bones of a dog curled beside a child's doll. She took the doll, strapped it to her saddle horn, let it rot there in the sun. A week later, she tracked a man called Lancer who'd worked for the Claiborne Syndicate. She found him in a brothel in Calder's Rest, drunk and blind in one eye. When he saw her, he laughed. Ain't no girl of Berenger's come lookin'. He made sure of that, paid her mama good to keep shut. Said she warn't his. Elias slit his throat before he finished the drink. She didn't ask him if he had kin. She didn't care. She left the body in the alley with a doll's arm stuffed in its mouth. Word traveled faster after that. By the time she reached Teller's Fork, there was a bounty on her head, not high enough to scare her, not low enough to ignore. She shot the first man who came for her in the spine. The second she hung from a cottonwood with a sign that read, "Try again." The third she let crawl away. He didn't make it far, but the message stuck. In Teller's Fork, she met a woman with black hair and a mouth full of gold teeth who called herself Mercy. Mercy didn't ask questions. She saw Eliah's eyes and said, "You huntin' or runnin'?" "Hunting. Then I got news." Mercy handed her a name, Castor Bell. Ex-Claiborne guard, moved east after the collapse, owns a gambling house in Boone Hollow. Known to keep records, known to talk too much when drunk, Eliah didn't thank her, just left a pouch of coin and rode through the night. Boone Hollow was mud and oil and sin. The gambling house sat on the high bluff, lit with gaslight and humming with violence. Eliah walked in with a rifle across her back and 2 knives on her belt. She found Castor Bell at a table, drunk and red-faced, bragging about the old days, how they buried the miners alive, how they drowned women who asked too many questions, how Berenger kept his boots clean no matter the blood. Eliah sat across from him, didn't smile. "You knew Susanna," she said. He blinked. "Who?" She drove the knife through his hand before he could lie. He screamed, the room stilled. "Berenger's girl," someone whispered. "Christ, it's her." She lined in clothes. Her breath was steady, her voice colder than winter. "You tell me where he went, or I skin you slow." He told her not because he feared her, but because in that moment he saw something in her eyes, not a girl, not a child, a reckoning. Berenger was alive, aged, hidden, changed, but not gone. He'd bought new names, new lands, new sins. A house on the plains beyond Broken Mesa, guarded by men with polished boots and loaded guns. Eliah left Boone Hollow before the blood dried. She didn't look back. The road to Broken Mesa was wind-bitten and lonely, carved through a stretch of country where nothing grew straight. Trees leaned like drunks, and the wind howled even when the sky was clear. Coyotes watched from ridgelines, yellow eyes blinking slow. Eliah rode a bay mare with a split ear and eyes like old coal. She didn't speak to the horse, didn't name it. She rode from dusk to dawn, pausing only to drink rainwater and sharpen her blades. She knew better than to ride straight into the lion's mouth, so she circled wide. Took 3 days to study the estate from a bluff 2 miles out, counting guards, noting shifts. They wore gray dusters and carried Winchesters, moved like men with military training, not common thugs. Berenger lived behind high stone walls and copper gates. The house was 2 stories of pale stone, southern-style veranda, shutters painted a fresh white. There were gardens out back. A young woman, maybe a servant, maybe not, tended the roses every morning with her head down and a pistol strapped beneath her apron. The old bastard lived like a king. She waited until the wind changed. Then she made her move. The first man died at dawn. She slit his throat while he urinated near the back fence, his rifle leaning against a post. She caught the blood in his own hat, buried the body in the hog pit. By noon, she had his uniform. She walked the perimeter with the other guards, hat low, gaze hard. No one looked twice. Men in Behringer's pay didn't speak much. They carried guilt in their silences. Inside the house, everything gleamed. Rugs from the Orient, paintings of rivers and white stallions. The air smelled of lilac and money. She saw him first from a balcony, Josiah Behringer, older, grayer but not frail, tall still, with a spine too straight for a man his age. He moved like he'd forgotten pain, like it had never applied to him. He spoke gently to a child, his grandchild, perhaps, a boy no older than 6. They were feeding caged birds. The boy laughed. Behringer smiled. Elia felt her breath slow. She had dreamed of this face. Now it was real. That night she set the stables ablaze. While the men ran screaming, while horses kicked themselves bloody in smoke and fire, she slipped inside. She found Behringer in the study, alone, one hand on a brandy glass, the other resting near a revolver. He looked up slowly, as if he'd been expecting her. "You look like her," he said. "The widow." She raised the gun. "You knew she'd hang." "I paid her to vanish. She chose the rope." "She chose mercy." He didn't flinch, didn't reach for the gun. "Then what are you here for, girl?" She moved closer. The firelight from the windows turned his skin gold. He looked more statue than man. "I want to see your eyes when it happens," she said. He laughed then, low, bitter. "They told me you'd come, left a message back in Vinegar Flats. My men found it." "I hoped they would." His fingers twitched. Not toward the gun, toward the brandy. "You think you're justice," he said, "but you're nothing. A girl passed off like a debt. You carry a name, but you don't know what it cost to build, to survive." She said nothing. "Do it, then." "Show me." She didn't shoot him, not yet. She walked to the desk, took the ledger. "Others helped you. They'll pay." "They're dust," he muttered, "like your mother." That was the last word he ever spoke. She shot him in the throat, let him bleed into his own maps. Then she burned the house. The child was gone by morning. She had watched the girl with the apron and pistol lead him into the woods, barefoot and terrified. Elia let them go. The child was too young to bear the sins of a father's father. She watched until the smoke swallowed the sky. Then she rode east, with the ledger in her coat and the name Behringer carved into every mile behind her. The fire drew attention. Even out in that wind-scoured stretch of mesa, someone always came. Ranchers, riders, drifters, curious or greedy, it made no difference. By the time the flames died, there was nothing left but black stone and twisted iron. They found Behringer's body charred but intact, the bullet hole clean in his throat. No sign of a struggle, no footprints worth naming, just a single object buried in the ashes. A doll's head half melted, set neatly atop the scorched hearth. The Pinkertons came days later, paid to clean up, not solve. They called it retribution, maybe rival business, maybe an old debt. But they left the report thin and the search thinner. No witnesses, no suspects, no girl. Elia rode east through thunder. The ledger weighed heavy against her ribs, leather binding slick with sweat and blood. Inside were names, men who paid for silence, men who profited from collapse, men who disappeared when the killing started. She didn't know all the codes yet, but one stood out, a name circled in red ink, followed by coordinates. Malric Coldhook Malric, a name with teeth. She found a man in Black Hollow who knew the place. Coldhook's up north near Dakota line. Used to be a mill town. Now it's barbed wire and locked doors. Fenced by a man named Malric, former Claiborne, they say. Elia nodded, bought bullets with her last coin. Sharpened every blade she carried. Let the horse rest and fed it apples because she knew what waited up north. Coldhook wasn't a town anymore. It was a fortress. She came in low on foot, 2 days through frost and shale, sleeping in brush, crawling through thorn. The place was circled by watchmen, 3 towers, dogs. Lanterns burning dusk to dawn. Inside the gates, industry still moved, smoke from chimneys, sounds of grinding wheels. Women carried bolts of cloth under armed escort. Men worked the gears under the whip, a company town. Remade into a prison, she watched for days, mapped their habits. Noted when the dogs were fed, when the guards smoked, when the bell rang and the lights dimmed. She waited until the sky turned pale and the cold bit deeper than her bones. Then she slipped in through the back wall. Low and fast, knife first, she killed the first man without a sound. The second cried out, but too late. By the time the dogs barked, she was already in the main house, rifle up, boots soaked in blood. Malric was in the great hall, seated at a long table, hands fat with rings. He didn't reach for a gun. He looked at her and smiled as if he knew. "I wondered when you'd come," he said, "the bastard girl. They said you weren't real." She raised the rifle. "I'm the one who lives." "Then shoot me." She didn't, not yet. She walked to the wall. There were photographs, Behringer, Lancer, others, men who built the West like a coffin. "You burned my name," he said. "So what now? Vengeance makes you holy." "No," she said, "it makes me clean." She shot him through the eye. The guards came running. She was gone, but not without leaving fire. She had poured oil across the warehouse floors. The gears groaned, then burst. Smoke boiled. Screams echoed across the gates. By dawn, Coldhook was ashes. The freed workers vanished into the hills. Some would speak of a shadow figure. Others swore, she wrote, a black horse with red eyes. She left behind no tracks, only silence. She returned to the bluff weeks later, sat where the wind cut the hardest. Opened the ledger again. One last name burned at the bottom of the page. This one not circled, not marked, just underlined in Behringer's own hand. Rigg, her heart slowed, the traitor, the man who took her from her mother's hands. He wasn't just passing through, he was part of it. The wind on the bluff had teeth now. Winter come early, biting into the seams of her coat, pushing through her skin like something trying to reach the bone. Elia didn't move. She held the ledger open, eyes fixed on the name. Rigg. She thought of the old man's silence, his muttering. The way he never used her name, never looked her in the eyes when he spoke of debt. The tin of coins buried with him. She remembered the way he aged too fast, the way he shook, even in warm weather. The way he once whispered her mother's name in a fever dream. He hadn't saved her, he had delivered her. She turned the page. There was more. A receipt, dated 16 years past. One line to J. Rigg for courier services rendered. One female child, age 6 months. Mother deceased. Disposal arranged. She didn't feel her hands close the book, didn't feel the cold. The grave lay 2 weeks west of her position. She remembered the ridge, the sagging pine above it, the notch of stone she'd marked before leaving his body behind. She rode hard, pausing only to water the horse and melt snow for drinking. When she reached it, the ground was half frozen. The cross she'd made had fallen, the earth had shifted. She dug anyway, fingers stiff, shovel slow. It wasn't the rot that hit her. It was what wasn't there. No bones, no coat, no rusted tin. She sat back on her heels, breath ragged. The grave was empty. In a saloon 3 towns east, a barkeep remembered a man matching Rigg's description. Said he passed through 2 winters ago, walking with a limp, one eye swollen shut. Paid with gold coins no one recognized. He asked after land, the man said. Said he was heading for a river valley past the canyons, wanted quiet, said he had ghosts. Elia paid in silence. She rode through a storm. The valley was green and quiet, not untouched. There were fences, coops, a smokehouse, a goat chewing through old rope, but it held a kind of hush, as if the trees had seen too much and agreed not to speak. She found the cabin by scent, cedar smoke, leather, and something sweet like honey boiled too long. The door opened before she knocked. He was smaller than she remembered, spine curved, face withered, beard gone white, but the eyes were the same. Mud-colored, sad, he looked at her and didn't flinch. I figured, he said. She didn't speak. He stepped aside. Inside, the walls were bare, a single rifle lined by the hearth, a cot, a pot of beans simmering over slow flame. He poured her tea. You were never supposed to come back here, he said. She didn't touch the cup. You left the grave empty. I didn't expect to die that day. Thought I had one more winter, but the fever nearly took me. I crawled out before the wolves came. You lied. I did. She leaned forward. You sold me. He looked up. I carried you. She threw the ledger on the table, pages fanned wide. He didn't open it. I did it for coin, he said, at first. Then I didn't know how to stop. You let her die. She was already gone. They sat like that for a long while, her fingers near her gun, his near the fire. I didn't kill her, he said. No, she said. But you didn't save her. I couldn't. Neither could I. She stood, he looked up. Are you here to end it? I'm here to bury it right. He nodded. I've got a shovel out back. They dug until moonrise. A real grave this time. Stones at the head, fresh earth, no secrets. She said nothing over the hole. He whispered something she didn't catch. When it was done, she handed him the doll's arm she'd carried all these years. He held it like it meant something. That night she slept beside the hearth. When she woke, he was gone. No body, no note, just the tea still warm. And beside it the ledger closed now, bound in twine, with one line added. The girl walked on. She burned the ledger in the fire, didn't watch it turn. Then she rode west. Elia rode west, but not toward any place she knew. The fire inside her had cooled, but not gone. It lived now in her marrow, quiet, steady, a different kind of flame. She had not run out of names, only the need to speak them. She crossed lowland valleys where frost clung to the grass even at noon. Through wind-burned hollows where nothing moved but the clouds, her boots wore thin, her hands cracked, but her eyes stayed sharp. In a way she was rootless again, but not lost. Word of her lingered, even as she passed unseen. In mining towns, they spoke of a woman who rode alone and never begged, of a face pale as ash, hair like knotted rope, and a voice that sounded like the end of something. They said she hunted men who couldn't be found. They said she walked through fire and left nothing but silence. They never spoke her name. In Greatwig, a boy followed her for half a mile before she turned. He froze, mud on his boots, straw in his hair. You killed Berenger, he said. His voice shook. He couldn't have been older than 10. She looked at him, hard. I heard my pa say so, he added, quieter now. He said you did what no man had the spine to do. She stepped toward him. He didn't run. Why follow me? He shrugged, wanted to see if you were real. I ain't. She handed him the last silver dollar she carried. For food, not for lies. He took it, nodded once, and vanished back toward the town. She didn't watch him go. The trail led nowhere. She made camp by rivers that had no name, slept under the ribs of dead trees. She fished with a thread and a nail. She stitched her coat with horsehair. And one morning she found something strange. A letter, pinned under a rock near a place called Widow's Bend. Ink smudged by dew, no name on it, but the handwriting was stiff, familiar. If you're reading this, you're still walking. That ledger was never meant to last. Let it burn. It won't bring them back. It won't make you whole. You killed the king, girl. That's more than most of us ever get. I got a shack near Cardin's Hill. Got land now. Chickens. A dog. You're welcome. R. She read it 3 times. Then she burned it, too. But she marked the hill on her map. She found the shack by accident, months later. Snow melting in patches, the world coming back to color. She hadn't meant to look. Not truly, but the dog barked once, then wagged its tail. And he stood in the doorway, older still, bent now like a sapling snapped and reset. He didn't speak. She didn't draw, just nodded once. Then walked past him into the house. They never spoke of the past. She fixed the broken fence. He dug another well. They took turns tending the hens. Sometimes she vanished for days, came back bloodied or quiet. He didn't ask. Other times he fell into fits, his eyes gone, muttering old names, old sins. She poured water on the floor and swept it clean. The ledger was gone, but memory never burned easy, and the West never stopped asking for blood. One night a man knocked, wore a bowler hat and carried a satchel too fine for the road. Said he was looking for the widow's girl, said there was still money on her head in 3 counties. Said there were men who wanted the past forgotten. She answered by opening the door wider, let him see her face. He turned pale like she'd shown him his own grave. You can walk, she said, or you can crawl. He walked. Left the satchel behind. Inside, more names, more debts. She threw it in the fire. And for the first time in years, she slept without her boots on. The dog lay beside her, and the wind didn't scream. Spring came brutal, as if the earth had to bleed before it could bloom. Rain carved gullies into the hillsides, and the chickens pecked at worms half drowned in the sodden ground. Elia planted nothing. She didn't believe in seasons that promised rebirth. Rig died on a Thursday. No words, no sound, just slumped over in the garden, hands still gripping a rusted spade. She stood over him for a long time, watching the soil turn black where his body fell. She didn't cry, didn't call for help. She dragged him to the shaded side of the hill and buried him beneath a tree that bore no fruit, no cross. No stone, just a line scratched into the bark, carried, not saved. She packed her gear that same night, doused the hearth. Left the dog behind, though it whined and pressed its head against her knee. She whispered something low to it, words meant only for ears that didn't speak back. Then she walked away, not toward vengeance, not this time. News traveled slower now. The world had grown quieter, or perhaps she had. The rail towns weren't bustling like before. Men drank less and watched the sky more, like something dark might rise from it. In Sallow Creek, an old woman recognized her. You're the widow's child, she said, clutching her coat. The one who turned blood to fire. Elia nodded once. I lost a son to Berenger, the woman said. You did what no sheriff would. Elia didn't answer. Where are you headed? The woman asked. Where no one knows my name. That place don't exist. Elia smiled. It didn't touch her eyes. It will. She found work in a place called Mercerfield. A ghost orchard, half-dead trees strangled in wire, roots buckling through dust. The owner had gone missing, and the town hired her to clean it out, make the land quiet again. She slept in the barn, alone, carried a knife in her boot and a tin cup in her coat. The children in town stared but didn't approach. One boy tried. She gave him a stone and sent him running. At night, she listened to the wind sift through the branches. It spoke like the ledger once did, soft, endless, full of names. But she didn't answer any more. She knew what reckoning cost. She paid it. Years passed, the orchard never bloomed, but the wind stopped calling her name, and that was enough. In time, the towns forgot. In time, the fire grew still. But somewhere in a drawer untouched by dust, a page remained, torn from the ledger before the flames. One sentence written in the old hand: she walked through silence and left no shadow. That was the last word written of her. And maybe the truest one.